I'm Troy Beverly, and this is Pan-African News. Kenya. Kenyan security personnel who killed anti-tax protesters identified. After analyzing over 5,000 images taken by protesters and journalists, the BBC has identified some of the security personnel involved in shooting and killing unarmed protesters during the anti-tax demonstrations at the Kenyan Parliament in June 2024. The Kenyan Constitution agrees the right to peaceful protest, yet the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, IPOA, has yet to hold accountable any of the police officers responsible for the deaths of 39 protesters and the injuries sustained by 361 others during the anti-tax demonstrations. On June 25th, Gen Z protesters began the third wave of demonstrations against a finance bill introduced on May 9th. The first two waves were successful in getting the administration of President William Ruto to nix the tax increases on bread, cooking oil, mobile phone transactions, vehicle registration, sanitary napkins, and baby wipes. However, the measures to raise $2.7 billion by the government to avoid external borrowing remained. As MPs filed into Parliament at around 9 a.m., thousands of protesters were held back by police officers using roadblocks and tear gas before upping the ante to water cannons and rubber bullets. By 1 p.m., more than 100,000 demonstrators were on the streets. At 2:14 p.m., opposition MPs stormed out of Parliament after the passage of the bill. 5 minutes later, the protesters set an abandoned police truck on fire while some briefly entered the parliamentary grounds. Meanwhile, a plainclothes police officer was videotaped shouting "Ua," which in Kiswahili means kill. Seconds later, 7 protesters collapsed, including 39-year-old software engineer David Chege and 25-year-old butcher Ericsson Mutisya, both of whom were shot dead. Among the 5 wounded was a protester left paralyzed from the waist down. Even after the fatal shots, the plainclothes officer was filmed shouting "Ua." The plainclothes officer was later identified as John Kaboi, who, according to multiple sources, works out of the Central Nairobi Police Station. The officer doing the shooting was more discreet and hid his face while firing into the crowd. Although he is identified, his name is unknown. At 3:04 p.m., more shots were fired and 3 bodies ended up on the ground. 2 were wounded while 27-year-old finance student Eric Shieni was shot dead from behind. Like Chege and Mutisya, Shieni was unarmed. Like Chege's and Mutisya's killer, the soldier who shot Shieni in the back of the head from 25 meters was identified, but his name is unknown. The Kenyan Defence Forces told the BBC that the IPOA has not requested it to investigate the police and military shootings during the demonstrations. On the evening of the shootings, Ruto thanked his security officers for defending, quote, the nation's sovereignty against organized criminals who hijacked the protests, unquote. The finance bill was dropped the following day.